I want to bring you inside the courtroom for just a moment because Donald Trump is being read at what is called his Parker warning. This is the judge telling him that he has to appear for court. Judge Merchan saying you have the right to be present during the trial and to assist your attorneys. Do you understand? Donald Trump says yes. Merchan says if you disrupt the proceedings, we can proceed with the trial in your absence. Do you understand? Donald Trump says I do. If you do not show up, there will be an arrest. Merchan says, underscoring that Donald Trump doesn't have a choice here. He's got to show up unless the court actually follows him from showing up. And while this process, this jury selection process, which we're waiting for, is going, it can stretch for a number of weeks. The former president is also at the same time fundraising off the criminal charges he's facing, and he claims he's being politically persecuted as he tries to win back the presidency. More than two-thirds of registered voters said the hush money charges facing Donald Trump are, quote, somewhat serious, according to a recent Reuters Ipsos poll. Around a third say the charges lacked seriousness. Joining me now is former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Mark Short. Really good to have you. So Donald Trump wants to use these trials as campaign events because he's got to be there anyway. You can see him talking to the assembled reporters, the assembled cameras when he goes in and out of court. How does the campaign use this to their advantage? And do they really see it as an advantage to have the leader of their party on criminal trial?
Well, Katie, thanks for having me. I think there's no doubt that it did play to his advantage through the primary season. I think that for a lot of Republican voters, they did view many of these prosecutions as politically charged and felt like the president that they had identified with for 4 years, they were fond of the policies, was under political attack. I'm not so sure that that plays out the same way now that he is the presumptive nominee and you move forward into the general election campaign, because the nation is very polarized and there's not many undecided voters left. And I think it probably in some ways it's more diminishing for the president to be seen in a courtroom than to be rallying outside one. And again, no doubt, I think it benefited him in the primary. I don't know that it's going to benefit him as much politically moving forward.
Well, explain that, because obviously base voters are base voters. When you go into the general election, do they expect that there are a lot of independent voters, a lot of swing voters or on the fence voters who are paying attention to this trial? Or do they believe that they'll be paying attention to the verdict of this trial?
Well, I think you have to play the card that's dealt, and I think that the president has an enormous ability to get media attention, and he will use this court as an ability to do that. But at the same time, I think for most voters in battleground states, I think they're going to be more concerned about what are your policy solutions to high grocery prices or to high energy prices, or what are you doing to fix the border? What are you doing? What would be your policy in the Middle East or in Eastern Europe? And so I'm not so sure how much this really impacts those swing voters. I think for many voters, this is already baked in. And despite how sordid and fair it is, I think that there's probably greater legal liability for the president on the federal charges than I think a case that the previous district attorneys passed on twice. It's 8 years old of a campaign finance charge, and your star witness for the prosecution happens to be somebody who was convicted of lying to Congress. And so I think at the end of the day, I don't think this really is going to benefit him much. To what extent it hurts him with where we are hard in our political system, I don't know, except that it limits his ability to talk about the things that are pocketbook issues for voters in battleground states.
The thing, Mark, it's Chris Jansing here. The thing that the reality is, this may be the only of the 4 criminal trials that actually makes it to trial before the election. And so for folks who in 2020, who had voted for him in 2016, decided, no, I'm not going to do that. The exhaustion factor, just the overall feeling that Donald Trump was too immersed in too many things that made them uncomfortable. Does it make a difference whether or not he is convicted here, in the sense of people may say, you know, I don't want to have a convicted felon as president of the United States? Is there a point at which, for that very small number of critical voters who will decide this election, this will be a game changer one way or another, Mark?
Chris, I think it's a great question. I remember in the fall of 2020 having an analysis from a group of swing voters in Wisconsin who had voted for Trump in 2016, who are not reliable Republican voters. And they said, look, he took on the border like I wanted. He reduced taxes. I got a better trade deal. I'm a dairy farmer. went down issues one by one, and the answer was, well, then you're voting for him again, right? It's like, no, I'm exhausted. I can't take the drama anymore. And so I do think that is a liability here, and I do think it could be a detriment to Donald Trump's campaign if they see him in the courtroom and this becomes, again, more and more the daily notion. But again, I think most voters in our country are already locked in, and there's a very small number that there's actually of swing voters left.
And Mark, Andrea here, one of the decisions this morning by the judge was that the Access Hollywood tape transcript could be admitted in evidence, but not the audio, not the video. So you won't see, the jurors would not see Donald Trump saying those things. It was so sordid at the time. Take us behind the scenes at that point in the campaign when the vice president, you were obviously, on that campaign, when Vice President Pence, the running mate, with his, obviously his evangelical background, his beautiful marriage and all of the rest. Well, how did he take that at the time?
Well, Andrea, if you recall, there were those in the campaign who I think were anxious for Vice President Pence to be out front and sort of providing a testimony to Donald Trump's character and saying that he was comfortable with this. But as I recall, the vice president's team was very clear in saying that, no, the president has to make amends for this and he has to go out and apologize first. Now, the video he did ended up obviously looking more like a hostage video, but nonetheless, there was very much a sense that this is not something somebody else can attest to. Donald Trump has to make the apology first here.
Mark, I'm so happy that Andrea brought up the Access Hollywood tape, because part of what the prosecution is going to be arguing is that, the big thing here is that this is a felony. It's a campaign violation because Donald Trump had this woman paid off to keep her silent, Stormy Daniels, because of the moment that the campaign was in. The Access Hollywood tape came out on October 7th. The agreement to pay Stormy Daniels was on October 8th, according to Michael Cohen. Can you just explain how dire it felt within the campaign in that moment, and how the campaign was worried about suburban women voters?
Well, I think that you go back even in the summer, people forget that despite a very contentious battle with Ted Cruz at the summer convention, Ted Cruz gave a speech in which he refused to support Donald Trump. And so our party was already divided at that point. And I think that there was a sense that Hillary Clinton's campaign was well-funded and more controversy wasn't helpful. But I still think that many of us underestimated the appeal that Donald Trump had for many middle-class and Midwestern voters in the Rust Belt. When you look at what happened in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and there were other issues that clearly voters cared about more at the time when it got to Election Day.
Yeah, that's true. But in the moment, the campaign didn't know what was going to win out. Yeah, and they were very worried about hemorrhaging voters that they needed. They were also very worried about hemorrhaging Republicans because, as you remember, Republicans en masse were backing away from Donald Trump. They were posting selfie videos saying they couldn't support him. Paul Ryan was telling, members of the caucus to do their conscience, to follow their conscience. Don't worry about going out to support Donald Trump. Campaign advisors were fleeing in droves. You won in the end, but you weren't so sure you were going to get there after this tape.
Absolutely, Kay. No one's going to argue that the tape was helpful. I think that you're right. There was a lot of division in the party, but nonetheless, I think there were other issues that overrode that. And again, will that be the issue as the way people view this trial? I don't know yet, but my sense is that probably so, that much of this is already baked into the electorate.
Yeah, I get it. I just think in the terms of the trial itself, what the prosecution is arguing is that this was election interference. And so, yeah, the voters decided it didn't matter, but the prosecution's going to argue that this was the reason that payment was made.
It's going to be litigated all over again in this trial, Chris.
It will be. Mark Short, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.
Chuck Rosenberg, Catherine Christian, your legal opinions about how tough a line this is and what you expect the judge to do.
I say it's put up or shut up time for the judge, because if he doesn't, at a minimum, admonish him and tell him to remove the post. And one of them, he actually named Michael Cohen, called him a liar. You can say, well, he is because he has a conviction. No, that's directly to his credibility. He's a witness, and Trump was told in a gag order not to do that. So he should be admonished, fined, and told to remove the post. And if he's not, then the gag order is meaningless.
Well, we know he's going to think about it over lunch, but he has to have anticipated this, Catherine.
I'm sure the judge knew beforehand that this was on, and I'm sure the defense attorneys were prepared.
Does he know what his outer limits are going to be? I mean, Donald Trump is going to continue talking about this. Will there come a point where these potentially $1,000 fines start to become meaningless, and the judge needs to step it up? And if so, how?
Yeah, well, as Vaughn said, the prosecutor said if he does it again, that he should be warned that he'll be jailed. So you're right, 1,000. No, this is the judge now has an opportunity to show who is the judge.
Would he actually go as far as jailing Donald Trump?
You know, I don't understand why he can't. All you have to do is, it's easy for me to say this, but you get the head of the Secret Service in there and say, if I have to incarcerate former President Trump, will you be able to keep him safe?
But what about the political impact of that? I mean, this is a man who has raised money, millions and millions of dollars, plus poll numbers on playing the victim ever since this indictment came down.
Every single time there has been a court case, they have raised money off of it. Every time he has appeared outside of court, they have raised money off of it.
Don't jail him the first time or even the second time. But what does this say about regular people who wouldn't get a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a second chance?
Would you say that Donald Trump is being treated differently?
Of course he is. And we'll find out after lunch. But I think Donald Trump deliberately sort of wants to see how far he can go with this judge right at the beginning.
He says he's being treated unfairly. Is he being treated more favorably?
He definitely is being treated more fairly. There's no way. First of all, he has 4 open indictments. Most defendants would be in jail in one of those jurisdictions just because of that. So he clearly is being treated specially on all of his cases.
So what is the line, Chuck?
Well, it's
heavy sigh.
It's hard to
Judge
draw,
Rosenberg.
but Catherine is exactly right. The judge needs to establish his control over this proceeding, over the court, and over this defendant.
Send a message early.
Well, send a message that's fair and thoughtful, and that he would send to a defendant in any other case. You know, we keep talking about the fact that nobody is above the law. Mr. Trump is not above the law, but neither is he below the law. He should be treated like anyone else would be treated. Now, logistically, that's hard because not everyone else has a Secret Service detail, for instance, or 4 pending indictments. But if you're going to run a trial, and the only person who runs a trial is a judge, then you have to, and this sounds trite and cliched, lay down the law. It's time to do it.
One of the things that's at stake here, we keep talking about history, Andrea, is we were founded on the idea that all people are equal, that if you're rich, if you're famous, the law treats you the same way. And so this is an important test for the judge and the message, as Chuck says, that
and
he's
of course,
going to
through
send.
American history, that was never the case, because it would be different if you were a white landowner than if you were a woman or anyone of color, a slave in particular. So we'll get back to that in a moment. Catherine and Chuck, please stay with us.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.
Gettysburg, what an unbelievable battle that was. The Battle of Gettysburg, what an unbelievable, I mean, it was so much and so interesting and so vicious and horrible and so beautiful in so many different ways. It represented such a big portion of the success of this country. Gettysburg, wow. I go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to look and to watch And the statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor. Did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake. He lost his great general. And they were fighting. Never fight uphill, me boys. But it was too late.
That was former President Trump on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania on Saturday. I'm thinking, John Meacham, is there anything to say about what he said, or maybe we should just move on?
I don't think Shelby Foote put it exactly that way. I think that's a fair way to put it.
You know, Trump delivered that history lesson just outside Allentown, where at times he sort of stumbled along with his speech.
Just this week, it was reported that an illegal and you just look at this, what's happening.
So in just hours, jury selection is set to begin in Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial in New York City. It is the first time in U.S. history that a former president will be on trial for criminal charges. Two sources with direct knowledge of the situation tell NBC News that 6,000 potential jurors will be subpoenaed to Manhattan criminal courts this week. Usually, about 4,000 jurors are called in a week. More than 1,500 will be called today. Not all of these potential jurors are intended for the Trump trial, though. But the increase in number can be attributed to the former president's trial. At a manufactured event at Mar-a-Lago with Speaker Mike Johnson, Trump said he intends to testify at the trial, though Trump's attorneys have yet to confirm or deny whether he'll do so. That's the Speaker of the House with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And there's Stormy Daniels. Trump is accused of coordinating a hush money payment to that adult film actress, Stormy Daniels, during the 2016 election to keep quiet about an alleged sexual encounter. Trump was charged with falsifying documents to cover up that payment. He denies the charges and denies having had sex with Daniels. Joining us now, former Deputy Chief of the Criminal Division for the Southern District of New York, Christy Greenberg. She is an MSNBC legal analyst. Thanks for coming on this morning. I think let's start at the very beginning. A lot of people are going to really be focusing now that the trial is actually beginning. Can you explain what this is really about, and then how jury selection could really impact the process here and even the outcome?
Sure. So just to level set on a few things, making a hush money payment on its own, not illegal. Falsifying business records, that is a misdemeanor under New York state law. So the way we get to a felony here is that these falsification of business records, the checks that he signed, the general ledger entries, those falsifications happened in order to commit another crime. And here, that was in order to conceal an agreement among Trump and others to unlawfully influence the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. So what I am going to be looking for in this trial is not necessarily the falsification of business records. I think the documents are very good. The deception just kind of leaps from the page of some of these documents. They're using fake names, fake settlement agreements, fake invoices. You're really going to be looking for witness testimony to get you to that criminal intent, that these payments were there to influence the outcome of the election. So that is going to be a focus as we go through this trial. In jury selection, what are you looking for? You're looking for the person who could potentially hang this